Chieh, it's awesome to meet you. Very grateful that Nahal from ENIAC was able to introduce us. It looks like you go way back with him, as do I. So always great to meet another one of his many friends. So I saw this announcement about Pelgo, and it really hit me personally because I have a very good friend who works at one of these huge companies, 20 plus years, super loyal, devoted, dedicated. And I just see him going through reorg after reorg.
Mm,
Actually got let go recently and then rehired. And this is a person who, is trying to put his he's got one daughter in college, he's got another coming up. And so I really kind of, when I saw what you were doing, it really spoke to me. And so yeah, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about, what was the sort of emotional impetus to go after this, and just share a little bit about what you're trying to do this time around on your new company Pelgo.
I think John, what you just said I'm so glad that he landed well. I think it's just anyone listening to this can probably name quite a few friends, especially when you're kind of in your middle stages of your career that are going through the same thing. Um, the insight that kind of we had was that when you look 40 years ago, it's probably quite maybe more than 40, 50 years ago, it's probably quite abnormal if you change companies. It was like you went with the same company your whole career, and no one would change careers. What are you talking about there? But I actually think like kind of the zigzag type of path that we're all going down in our careers, especially with the change of pace that the pace of change that AI is kind of injecting into everyone's career these days. I think transitions are going to be the norm. I think over the next few years, it's going to be very, very rare for someone that says, I have one line on my LinkedIn and that's all I've done. And this is the only industry, this is the only career I've ever had. I think that's going to be a true unicorn in the coming years. And so we want to help kind of lessen the blow as folks transition. And that was the inspiration behind Pelgo.
And so the bet is, hey, there's going to be a lot more outplacement needed as AI sort of forces a retooling, reskilling of the workforce. The latest models are just completely, it's just so wild, like how fast they're moving. I started vibe coding recently, and I'm an engineer by trade. I'm just blown away. And, it is coming, right?
Yeah. And right, like if and I'm sure if we had this conversation in 6 months, like the code that you're writing now is going to be that much cleaner, that much more production ready. And I don't think it's stopping. So, I just feel like it's a matter of time before certain workflows are 100% automated. And when that day comes, there's going to be huge job destruction across the world. But I am also a firm believer that there's going to be huge job creation as well. And so being able to pipe folks who are losing their jobs over to more AI first jobs and AI enabled jobs will be the fundamental mission of this company.
Got it. So the sort of like dark, depressing view would be like, you're folks losing their job to AI, and then they're going to get a job like building AI data centers. But my feeling is that's probably not your vision for what the world will
Yeah.
be like, right? It's going to be, hopefully, and I hope so too, right? It's going to be a brighter future, even though we're going to have some bumps as we get to that brighter future. So give me an
Yeah.
example, maybe, of like what does that look like in reality?
Yeah, for sure. I guess a more esoteric question is also kind of who's taking care of these folks. I feel like there's so many companies that are well funded that are producing technology that will eventually take people's jobs. But there's very few companies saying, okay, how do we train these folks, or how do we get them ready so that we're not all just sitting on a couch collecting UBI checks? Because I also don't fundamentally believe that that will be our future either. And so I think we're one of the few to really try to tackle this. I guess fight fire with fire, in a certain respect. But I did want to answer your question before of saying, okay, well, what is a potential example? As much as we just joked about it, it's like, yeah, if you, let's just say you're in a fulfillment center today, and that fulfillment center in the coming years will become lights out automated, meaning that you don't have lights because there's no humans in it or very little. Um, it'd be hard for us to say, okay, let's retrain you to become a medical doctor, or let's retrain you to become XYZ highly skilled. But at the same time, these data centers being built, they need different skill sets. They need folks to actually physically work in these data centers. They're not just like lights out and they just hum in the background. There's still hundreds of people that work at these places, and so are there roles that we can train you for or pipe you over to, so that you can take part of this kind of job evolution rather than again being kind of left out of this AI transition?
And what would be some like non-tech jobs that these folks might transition into? So data center, obviously, very technical.
Yeah, for
Maybe,
sure.
maybe, yeah.
So the way the more we're learning about this, so the way data centers are constructed, um, the temperature needs, uh, the security needs, electricity needs, all those things are quite unique for data centers,
Mhm.
especially as they function today. And so being able to again like provide some training for folks to be able to kind of have that expertise in that specialty would
Mhm.
be a potential outcome for someone more in a blue collar environment.
I see. And where do you see from your initial product perspective, your customer discovery, you talked about data centers, are there certain types of jobs that you see people that they will be transitioning into these, sort of post AI jobs? What are the industries that you kind of see are like these are the ones you really need to focus on?
Yeah, I don't know if it's good or bad or it's just indicative of the times, the folks that are most forward thinking. But we're getting a lot of interest from different tech companies, and I think the roles being eliminated or the roles that they're looking to eliminate, unfortunately, are a lot of the junior ranks, which also poses a real question because I'm sure like John, me and you, like we probably went to the office every day when we started our careers, and like you learn through mentorship, but it's not only that if their mentors aren't there, but if that first rung isn't there to start your career, I think that poses a really big question and problem for society. And so, where's that first rung in the future? And so, that's just the early kind of reading that we're seeing. But I'm sure this is going to evolve. Remember, we just launched earlier this week, and so I think there's still a lot to be written.
Yeah, it's still early days, and yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. Your co-founder has a very interesting background, and it's interesting because there was, many years ago, as there was sort of the rise of outsourcing, right? There were sort of similar, vibes, conversations. Like I think this is more of a super cycle and will be ultimately kind of a bigger deal overall, right? In terms of how the whole world operates. But that was, back, call it, I don't know, 20 years ago, that was a real focus where people are saying, hey, we're gonna lose all these jobs to outsourcing. So it's really interesting who you partner with. Maybe just share a little bit about that because I think that I saw that I was like, wow, this is fascinating.
Hats off to you, John, because you're the first person that drew that nexus that I've talked to outside of kind of investors on our cap table. And so it's funny. Literally, this is the first time someone has pointed that out to me. You're exactly right. When you trace the world of systems integrators, the world of outsourcers, the world of Cognizant, and the many other companies that are like Cognizant, um, Cognizant started off as a company, as I understand it, that helped folks outsource jobs to India because of this thing that was invented called the internet. You no longer need to be physically planted on site in order to do your job. Over the years, though, as the internet spawned more and more jobs in these esoteric categories where companies needed big, either huge expertise or huge numbers of people, folks started to look towards the Cognizants of the world, Accenture, Deloitte, all these different companies. Not again because they're worried about job destruction, but there was all these new job categories being created that they suddenly needed maybe, you know, um, content moderation for social media to the tune of we need 5,000 people yesterday to do this for us. In the 90s, when a lot of these companies started, who knew what social media was? Who knew that content moderation was going to be a thing? But here we are 20 plus years later. It's a huge business. So in some ways, we do believe that AI will follow a similar trajectory, maybe just way more compact than 20 years.
I think it'll be less than 20 years. The big question will be how
I mean, at
much
this
less.
pace, I mean, like, when you're doing your vibe coding, I mean, like, you must be seeing kind of the pace of change, like in a very scary way.
It's unbelievable, and I studied CS at Penn with Nahal, so I have that background, and I just now vibe coding with Claude Code. I've written uh, a CLI to interact with my CRM. I've written a thing that plugs into Gmail. I wrote my own sort of people search, email address finder plugin,
Yep.
and all in the span of, if you pack it all in, maybe I don't know, a day. And
Do
like I'm doing basic stuff, right? You can do more advanced stuff that I'm doing. Like I'm just getting started.
do you think, so what do you make of the whole SaaS, kind of meltdown that happened, like, over the last week or 2? Like, real, overblown, or
Yeah, it's a good question. I have in past lives worked in SaaS and cloud at companies like AWS, DigitalOcean, et cetera. So have some personal experience around, some of those business models, and the vibe coding actually and getting hands on with it has
Mm.
actually helped me see. Okay, yeah, you see the big headline of things are dropping by
Yeah,
twenty
yeah.
percent or whatever, but like, what is the thing that's actually going to cause the margin compression? And even just at like a real micro level with the vibe coding, I've seen it now with my own eyes where you'll see products who maybe have a very restricted feature set for, the $5 a month user or
Yeah,
the free user. And I know this from being a product manager that the APIs often actually have a very different set of permissions, entitlements, et cetera. And I know why. It's because like that's additional stuff you need to build and you have to prioritize it and all this kind of stuff. But what that means is, and I've seen this across multiple products I've vibe coded against, is that a lot of these APIs are full featured, regardless of if you're paying 0 a month, $5 a
yeah.
month, et
Yep.
cetera. So, and I mean, if it gets painful enough for some of these companies, they will, sort of tighten that up.
Sure, sure.
But my guess is like they probably won't
Yeah,
because they won't be able to do other stuff. And so, but then that's margin compression there.
what's interesting about what you just said also is that I really wonder how this all plays out from a distribution standpoint, because as you're building your own plugins and kind of, your own kind of mini SaaS modules, if you will, um, do we enter a world where every coffee shop kind of builds a little, like, certain kind of little snippets of code and little kind of apps here and there for their own personal use? Or does that coffee shop suddenly say, is that like what we're building? Probably 20 other independent coffee shops need the same thing. And if so, then what's that point of distribution? Because they're not going to have like a go to market kind of muscle at all to flex. So, that part's super interesting. I really wonder. It's a little bit outside the realm of what we're doing at Pelgo, but still, it's something that I think about.
Yeah, my this is my hot take. I think that you're gonna see a rise of the IT guy again.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so because that person is gonna be close to these small businesses
Yep.
and they're gonna be able to bring not only like, yeah, I'll set up the Wi-Fi, I'll, get certain things running physically, but also they're technical enough for sure to vibe code some custom solutions for these customers. So I actually think it'll be really fantastic for those folks. And I think, that's an industry which has been, not super exciting, but I think we might see a resurgence of that because of vibe coding.
In some ways, just to bring it back to kind of our original conversation about what are jobs that went away or are going away that are, but are also being created, you can make that argument for forward deployed engineers, that some of these junior engineers that are now not getting the opportunities they did, on one hand, are, you could find like endless amounts of kind of what you just described as, in certain ways it's like forward deployed engineering. It's like you're on site finding what the peculiarities of that company are or that site and kind of building quick, kind of solutions for them. And so again, like, you can, on one hand, we could say, well, those, software engineering jobs, went away, but it's like, well, like, if they reskilled, retrained a bit, there's a lot of jobs, including forward deployed engineering, that's being created. So yeah, I mean, it's just, we're just at the beginning of this. So I feel like there's going to be some gnarly jobs that we can't even imagine today that will be commonplace, in just a few short years.
So I'm going to completely shift gears because we only have about a minute left. But of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
in my research, you are on the board of Six Flags, and of course, I have attended
Oh,
been to
there
Six
you go.
Flags,
Yeah.
like most people who grew up in the Northeast.
Roller coasters with
So,
chicken fingers. So I could talk about this all day.
what's something about Six Flags that people don't know but would find really interesting?
Um, One, how much on the back end, maybe a more mundane fact is how seriously safety is taken. And just because a coaster, its paint looks like it should be repainted, does not mean they're skimping on safety. If there's $1 an hour, Six Flags, as well as any other company, is spending it on safety. You can rest assured that that is kind of what I've seen. The other is that just how transformative Fright Fest has been for the entire industry. And Halloween is like the moment for theme parks around the country. You would think August, July, but like Fright Fest, it is big. It is big, big, big. And yeah, it's just amazing. And then if any, and we just opened up Six Flags Qiddiya recently. And the coaster there, Falcon's Flight, is just unreal. So if anyone's listening to this, if you Google or go on YouTube and just look up Falcon's Flight sound, I mean that thing literally sounds like a jet coming down that cliff. I just can't wait to ride it. So yeah, I you can tell I'm a huge enthusiast, and I just feel very fortunate to also be involved with them on a corporate level as well.
Chieh, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.